So let's talk about the Muslim Brotherhood here. Is the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, and should the U.S. designate it as a terrorist organization?
Absolutely. I think that unequivocally they are involved in some really shady stuff. I think that their charities operate in plain view, and I think that they become outlets for a lot of hate. And I think that they are just outright involved in funding other organizations that the United States has deemed a terrorist organization.
So, Gio, what's your sort of experience and exposure to the Ikhwan? This
Yeah,
Ikhwan is the Arabic term for Muslim
right.
Brotherhood.
Ikhwan, generally called as Ikhwan al-Muslimin, that is the Muslim Brotherhood, but shortened as Ikhwan. So I think there are many strings attached or many layers to it. Just outright to say that ban it and call it a terrorist organization. I think it serves some interests, but I think we have to look at holistically on this particular topic. You can't just pick something and say because it doesn't align with the way we see one certain angle doesn't take the whole reality. I say Ikhwan al-Muslimin, he is doing a lot of groundwork in terms of charity, in terms of helping people. And when I say Ikhwan al-Muslimin, I say that it generally operates in third world countries too. It's in Pakistan, it's in Bangladesh, it's in Misr. Originally, it started from Misr, from Egypt. But saying that there is a lot of good groundwork in Pakistan. I don't know what their hidden motive is, whether they want to take over the whole world. But on the surface, if you ask any single Pakistani in Pakistan about Ikhwan, or there is a different name for them in Pakistan, they would say they're the best, right? They are the best. Similarly, I don't know about Bangladesh or anywhere else, but I just want to know what are the allegations or what is something that is taking them to the verge of banning them from doing any kind of charity activities or groundwork.
Okay, so my basic understanding of the Muslim Brotherhood is it comes from Egypt, right? You've got Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna.
Hmm.
These are the kind of, and the premise of the Muslim Brotherhood is to restore the Muslim world to its sort of former state of glory through through democratic legal means, eventually restoring and uniting the Muslim world under the Caliphate in the long run, right? But they publicly they disavow like terrorism and violent uprising in most places that they operate, and are trying to use legal means to like holistically advocate for Islam as the solution to everything, right? So the whole premise of the Muslim Brotherhood is Islam is the solution. So the idea is that every single social problem in the Middle East, every single social problem in the world can be resolved by implementing an Islamic system holistically.
Hmm.
And what that results in is an organization that they'll do whatever they can wherever they're allowed to do it.
No, I think well, again, I'm speaking purely from what I see them in Pakistan, right? I have not seen them in Masar, or I have not delved deep into to understanding Ikhwan in like at the very core level as an international organization. But talking about Jamaat al-Islamiyah, that is in Pakistan, that is Ikhwan in Pakistan. Number one, they're highly democratic. Highly democratic means there is a system of choosing people who will rule. For example, Amir, it's called Amir. Amir is the leader.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Shura. Shura is council of people.
Yep.
Council of people is selected by members of the Shura, right? So I think that is the most highest degree of democracy, which even it's not in the United States. So to say that that is the only one party in Pakistan that is known for having such a democracy. So when you have such a democracy, then having a strict rules or implementing one particular way is not sounding right with that type of notion where there is democracy. Yes, they believe in Islamic way, but through democracy, not through a dictatorship type of mentality, you know?
Well, I think it's one of these things where they very much believe in voting their way to the solution. But I think democracy in a lot of ways is a means to an end. Now, obviously, there'd be some, sort of democracy. But for example, when the Muslim Brotherhood was, there is, yeah, so in the sort of classical Sunni framing, right, you've got the Caliphate chosen by a Shura council, but they're not advocating for absolute freedom of conscience, for example. So when the Ikhwan al-Muslimiyah, the Muslim Brotherhood, was active in the United Arab Emirates, they were trying to challenge the Emirati government for allowing churches on the Arabian Gulf,
Yeah,
right?
they're extremist in
Right,
those type of, like, I would say they're very conservative Muslims.
right. Yes. So the kind of democracy that they kind of like, would ultimately be aligning for is not one that allows ultimate freedom of conscience, right? It's, picking your leaders is something that the Islamic framework, allows for within the Muslim community. Now, whether they would give non-Muslims the right to vote, for example, that remains to be seen.
Agree?
But basically, because they have these, overarching goals of implementing Islam everywhere, um, the argument that places like Saudi Arabia are going to make, which Saudi Arabia has banned it since 2014, I believe.
Saudi Arabia is banning everything that is related to Islam. Saudi is out of the topic in this particular context, because even you can't preach anything in Saudi Arabia, let alone, because they are afraid of their own monarch system. So there are different variables there. Yeah.
Yeah, but even
But are they banning it because of that, or are they banning it because it's not good? Like, I think that's a viable question. When we were in Saudi, I did not talk to government officials in Saudi. I talked to people in Saudi,
Mm-hmm.
and their impression of the Muslim Brotherhood was very bad. That the government, that they were trying to undermine their stability. And my point on, like, their presence in Egypt during the Arab Spring was like, well, all right, it's all fine and dandy, and you're advocating for things until you help engineer a revolution and overthrow whatever, government popular, government unpopular, whatever. They did take a step outside of being a charitable organization and exercise their, like, political and economic, and their individual, like, ground game in exerting their will over what happened in Egypt, and then over the unrest in Egypt, and then used it to their end to essentially take over a country. So to me, that's a huge red flag, right? And then on top of that, like, speaking about it from Turkey, they operate in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And since they've been operating in Turkey and have a more and more, like, vocal voice, right? Um, the country honestly has gotten less free. It's gotten less democratic, right? It's gotten more authoritarian and more, like, more you know, it's under their influence. And they're also in league with the current government. So when they align themselves with the government, right, and that gives them a seat at the table, things always go trend away from, like, religious freedom, right? So Christianity in Turkey is dwindling. Like, it's the lowest numbers ever. People who aren't, like, ethnic Muslim Turks are being driven out,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and it's not even like, all right, Turkey's, like, definitely got founded on the idea of being a republic, and the idea of the republic is being erased. And I don't think it's just them, but I do think that they're a player in it. So, I think it's like, this is going to be controversial, but I think it's what, like, Hizmet would be if they didn't have to be Hizmet, right?
uh-huh.
If they didn't have to be Hizmet, if Hizmet Turkey could be what Hizmet Turkestan is, you know what I mean? Like, if Hizmet was like more authoritarian, like I guess a little bit, um, I don't know, more aggressive in their take. So I don't, I understand that, like, they can do good things. Like, I think that, but I also think that I don't know if it's centralized. right? So this is my question. Because if it's centralized, right, and there's like a brain trust behind the whole thing, that's one thing. It may operate differently in Pakistan than it does in, Saudi
Say
Arabia
Turkey.
or Egypt or Turkey or something like that. So just as a casual outside observer, and also being a Turk and watching their involvement in Gulf states and other places in the Middle East, and also I went back and I watched some interesting videos from the 50s and 60s of the Egyptian prime minister having debates with leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood back then
Mm-hmm.
and what they were advocating for. And then you can see a clear progression from what they were advocating for at that point, right? Like women, having like not access to education, right? Like this is Egypt. This is the prime minister. This is the prime minister of Egypt saying these things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like wanting to enforce more Islamic rules, like head coverings and all the other things, which is fine, because in America we have people who are like we had Pat Robertson run for president. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that happened back then was it was a demand, right? Like there are demands made, and then the secular government is like, we're not going to do that. And then you see a clear line from that line of thinking, and the acceleration of those things to the Islamic Revolution in 1979, which is like the defining changing thing in Islam,
Yeah.
right? Like in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in all of these other places. So
Got it. 2 points. Sorry to cut you
yeah,
there.
all right.
Yeah, it's like it's building up. So I think there is some really interesting points that I want you guys to just look at it. You talked about Saudi Arabia, both of you. Saudi Arabia has its own state version of Islam. Anything that deviates from it, Saudi is not accepting it. In their mosques, sermons are issued by the government. In their anything that is Islamic has to have a straight approval.
Turkey's like that too.
You can't do that without state's approval,
Mm-hmm.
right? So state is very, very strict in controlling because, of course, they're afraid of uprising in any segment of Islam. Islam is the biggest catalyst in that Muslim world to cause an uprising. Point number two, going back to Pakistan or any Muslim country, if they want to impose Sharia on them by the will of, if, for example, why I believe in that. So Jamaat al-Islami, that's the organization called, right? They are not elected in Pakistan because Pakistanis don't want Islamic system, most of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're not elected. Say Jamaat Islami comes in power, it means people support them. People want them. And if they want to implement laws of Islam, go ahead, do that. I'm not against it because that's the will of the people. I'm not here to tell what you need to do. As long as you're not coming after me,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're not shooting guns at me and saying, hey, I'm going to come and take over this place. As long as you restrict yourself to a particular place and implement whatever system you want to implement, I'm okay with that. I have no problem. Right? That was point number two. Point number three about Turkey you mentioned, right? And Egypt, how it was back in. So I would give it an example of like United States itself. In 60s, how things were. You know that how big of a revolution we went through. Martin Luther King Jr., a big name in 60s and 70s, segregated education system, women rights, and
Desegregated.
yeah, it was segregated, and then
Yeah,
it kind of like
right.
and those things that happened. And so America also went through a big transition in terms of like where they were before 60s versus how those gradual changes affected. So I think in that context, things change over 30, 40, 50 years. So does the ideologies. It gets lenient and more easy, I guess.
So I think when I think about this, there's a sort of an ideological chain, but basically, ISIS broke away from Al Qaeda because they thought their plan was too, long term, and ISIS wanted to start a caliphate right now.
Yeah, short.
Al Qaeda broke away from the Muslim Brotherhood. So Ayman al-Zawahiri is inspired by both Syed Qutb and Hassan al-Banna, but basically sees their methodology as too
Lenient,
moderate,
yes.
too lenient, too moderate, right? Too lenient. It's like you're not taking action fast enough. We need to take more drastic actions to achieve our goals. So we have to at least give credit where credit is due. The Muslim Brotherhood is not Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, but what it is it does believe in a complete changing of the system of the Muslim world from top to bottom. It does believe in that and is advocating for that. So if you're Saudi Arabia or UAE, you're not betraying any of your stated principles to say, no, you're not allowed to advocate for complete overthrow of the current system of things. We will not tolerate any of your activities. That's kind of, it's fair, actually.
Mhm.
The question is, though, in America, where freedom of speech, freedom of conscience is a key sort of founding stated principle.
Which is these days being in question. So that is just to say, I mean, like it's been freedom of speech for a long time, but nowadays
I would say it's always been in question. I mean, the thing about it is the idea. If you look at like the trajectory, the course, the cases that the Supreme Court has heard about free speech, they've been hearing those cases since the 40s, since the 30s.
Mm.
Like the idea of free speech has always been something that gets kind of pulled back into court every, I don't know, decade or something like that, right? So I don't think it's ever really just like,
There was a free speech, yeah.
yeah, well, it's always like, what is free speech, right? Like,
Limits.
once the newspapers started like printing things that about like Hitler, for instance, you know, there was a significant number of people in America who didn't want to hear that. So people would sue, and then that would wind up in the court system, right? And then, once we got to Vietnam and Korea and all this other stuff, people were like, well, we don't like being involved in Korea. So, they would be suppressed and they would sue.
Mm-hmm.
We have a legal system where you can do that.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
so I basically make the argument.
But I would agree with you in the idea is that like things have gotten more pitched
Mm-hmm.
since the 60s, right?
Yes.
Like since the Cultural Revolution of the 60s.
So basically, what I would say the problem we're trying to deal with here is that I don't think the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization in the traditional sense, right? There's branches of it which veer into that
Yeah, or tendencies.
tendencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as a sort of centralized or decentralized system, it's like it doesn't quite fit into that category. Um, and what we and so terrorist organization is the closest thing America has for a legal framework that could actually deal with it. In reality, what it is it's a transnational organization dedicated to undermining the existing world order with the goal of supplanting it with a new one. And I don't think we have a good legal framework for dealing with those things in America. So even like when we were at that UW protest, we have those kids arguing that their goals are number one, ceasefire; number two, dissolution of the state of Israel; goal three, dissolution of the United States.
Right.
And so like being there's like a legally recognized American Communist Party.
Yeah.
Even despite us fighting a whole like Cold War with the communists about that's still
Right.
like
I know, it's crazy.
legal.
Yeah. I mean, we have Nazism like openly embraced for, I don't know, like almost, not, let's just say white supremacist tendencies, like, embraced for a very long time here in lots of different places. So,
Yeah.
but I think my main question, and I haven't done like enough research on it for the justification in this instance, is I think that if they're following the money and they have a reason to ban them, um, then I want to see that reason, right? Like I want to see the receipts. I want to see why you're calling this, like, if there are transactions, like financial transactions going in places, right? Like the long term accusation by governments that have kicked them out is that they are a money laundering organization.
Yeah.
right? Like they take a lot of money in from a lot of different places and they send it to places, and it looks shady from the outside. And then when you try and press them on their books or something like that, it's like, it's a moving target, right? Like, the money's going through Egypt, through Turkey, then to Qatar, then to, you know what I mean? Like different
Yeah,
places,
Afghanistan.
to Afghanistan, all these different places. And it's got the guise of like, well, we're digging wells, right? But, you know, there is a lot of people calling that into question, and my hope would be that the United States would say, we have actual like evidence, and this is what we're basing our decision on, and you know I would like to see that. I mean, just as being an objective person, right? Like maybe they're not nefarious, right? Like maybe they're just on the other end of the ideological spectrum, and then you have to deal with that, through politics, right? Like with the Communist Party or something like that. But if there are receipts, then no, they got to go.
Yeah. And also, I would like to add one thing, which is kind of related to that, is there are three systems in the world according to a Muslim brain, right? There is capitalism, there is communism, and there is Sharia, right? So for them, communism is not working, capitalism is Western, and it's not aligning with how they think of certain things, right? There is too much of freedom there. There is too much of I would say interest oriented, banks oriented, the way it is to make richer people more rich and poor more poor. That's the idea of capitalism in their mind. So the escape route for them is the Islamic way. Where, and I think that is imaginary. That doesn't have any legs to stand upon in reality.
I would agree with you.
Yep.
Right? And that is fantasy. That they're living in a fantasy that Muhammad's time or Abu Bakr's time or Omar's time was the best time where poors were taken care of and there was like everybody was in, yes.
I noticed you skipped Uthman.
Well, yes. Abu Bakr, Omar, after Omar comes the Uthman, so you just give me enough time to go to it. Right? But that being said, there's a mindset. And that mindset is just imagining imaginary world, which is 1400 years ago almost, doesn't have any realistic implementation to this day. And then this Jamaat al-Islamiyah or Ikhwan al-Muslimin is exactly targeting that type of people who are frustrated by communism and capitalism and want to change. And the change is just imaginary, which is not realistic. So that's how I will conclude my point that Ikhwan al-Muslimin, I agree with him. If you want to ban them, bring the receipts, show the links that they are funding terrorism and so on and so forth. If so, then they deserve justice.
I had a great conversation with some friends of mine the other day, and we were talking about how information has changed since the pandemic, right? And we got in a long and kind of heated discussion about masks. They're more left than I am, right? So they were like, no, they absolutely did this and they did that. And the truth is the truth has come out over time. So what we were told in the 20s, in the early 2020 is different than what we're being told now. And what I was asserting is that there were elements of what we're being told now that they knew in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was like we have to prevent a panic. We can't trust people with the truth, right? And my thing is that just give us the truth. Just give us the truth and let us decide what to do with it, right? Like the more and more that, you're sitting there trying to protect me from the truth or insulate me from the truth or something. So it might be crazy, but let's be as transparent as possible, right? Let's be transparent with these decisions. Let's have like a whole section of the State Department website signed off by Marco Rubio and whoever else his undersecretary is, of what their actual rationale is. Show me the case. And then, to quote Jerry Maguire, show me the money. You know what I mean? Show me the money.
So I think with anything like the Muslim Brotherhood, I would think of it like a sort of cancer. But anytime you're like removing a tumor, you have to be really, really, really careful and precise when you remove something like that.
Right.
And so the problems with the Muslim Brotherhood cannot be implemented onto every single person who has some sort of connection to it. You've got to really target the kind of operatives that deserve to be targeted, and not like, so in Egypt, for example, this is what we kind of see is we see a lot of collateral damage. So I have a friend who's, younger brother who's like 19 has been in jail for 2 years for like posting kind of like pro Muslim Brotherhood memes kind of thing. And that while, the Egyptian government is probably doing quite well to stamp down on the Muslim Brotherhood as a general rule, some 19-year-old kid posting memes is not, is not the way you deal with that.
Yeah, it's not worthy of, like, who knows how long his term is for, right? Is it
Right,
indefinite?
right. We don't know. We don't know.
I mean, in America, somebody would sue you. That's the difference,
right.
right? Like,
And I would say this, James, that I would prefer Ikhwan over a cruel Muslim dictator. And why I say this, that at least Ikhwan believe in a democratic system of election within them. They can be held accountable within the council, within the Sharia, or Shura, which is not Sharia, within the Shura. But comes a dictator, right? Like Pakistani General Asim Munir is a current dictator of Pakistan. Right? There's a puppet government. Let's not get into it. Behind the doors, he is the one controlling everything, right? And he's very, very opinionated on many, many things, right? So I would rather prefer this Ikhwan or Jamaat al-Islamiyah to rule the government rather than a crazy Muslim dictator, right? So banning such organization will come with certain downsides, which will be beneficial for one particular country, say United States, but it will have catastrophic effects on its very own country, which is working on, if you see it from that particular lens. That's my take.
Yeah, so this is a delicate and complicated process, which needs a lot more ideological nuance and intelligence than, hey, let's just,
Yeah,
ban
it's
everything.
not as simple, just like it's just stick in, you are done, right?
Right.
unless you have receipts.